Oh, okay. So do we now this is brings up an interesting point, because you have a lot of people on the in the alternative media talking about implants and the dangers of getting the microchip and stuff like that. And what you're saying, by the sounds of it, is they don't even need a microchip.
Not
microchip
for,
is passé. That's
emotional
like
behavior. I mean, if you want to affect a specific individual person, then you might need something different. But even that's questionable these days, because as we learn more about sort of the unique signature that each person produces. You know, I mean, we produce our own electromagnetic emanation that is as unique as your fingerprint. So, you know, that becomes a whole other area where people are looking to see if there's some way, you know, to sort of track people based on that footprint, given the fact that it does change over a lifetime, but if you're maintaining your tracking, you'll be able to keep up with those changes. That's pretty interesting stuff. The implant technologies, from my perspective, because they're becoming smaller and smaller and you're getting greater and greater density on a microcircuit, that now on the head of a pin you can store quite a bit of data, and it's getting better as nanotechnologies advance. What I would expect to see is for tracking humans, like tracking inventory, some form of microcircuit will be used. The other place they're going to be used is in the currency itself, because now they're getting cheap enough where then you'll be able to track the flow of every dollar, every printed dollar bill, which pretty much eliminates the black market currencies, because if those dollars aren't accounted for properly for the tax authorities, it makes it very easy to figure out where the money was and where the money wasn't. And I think that's, again, this more directed and controlled society that we're headed for. You know, and many people are speaking about that. We covered those issues in two other books, one called Earthrising the Revolution and Earthrising 2, which gets into sort of a mix of technologies in the direction in which we're headed. And you know, and from our perspective at earthpulse.com, we've been really focused on educating the public on technologies, serving as a technology reporter, if you will. And in the four major books we've published, over 1,650 reference sources were used that were culled from over 100,000 documents that we necked down to 20,000 in our archives at that time. So we do a lot of condensing of data and make it very available to people, and then we footnote every single thing so that if there's questions or more information is needed by professionals or lay people, they have a place to go, and the footnotes appear on every page. And some people find that inconvenient, as most publishers do, but I find myself as a reader, I'd like to see, when I see something that I question, I want to see where it came from. And it's nice to be able to look at the bottom of the page and say, that came from, you know, a congressional report or a New York Times article or what have you. And then I can decide whether I want to accept that or whether I want to look it up and see how it was used in context. And that gives me the opportunity to do it. And I think it also gives lay people the tools they need, because so many writers write some pretty outrageous things without backing it up. And I write to create change. I don't write for entertainment, and I don't write for a living. I make my living doing something else. But I can tell you, I write for change. I'm an activist publisher. I'm not the neutered news. What I have is an opinion based on facts, and those facts I present in a way that is compelling for the public, and it's kept us in this work for 16 years, appearing before scientific bodies, political bodies, and every kind of community group, from UFO conferences, you know, to gatherings of political people from around the world. And you know, and I take most invitations, because my view is people who come to conferences are activists. They get engaged, and whether it's these issues or other issues, part of our mission is also to create and to dissipate the environment of fear that is being created, and try and replace some of that with knowledge, and then the real message behind much of our research, what we have discovered in 16 years, the most important thing, because people have asked us all the time, what can we do, what can we do, and most of that is out of fear. What I can say is, in the research done on the human mind by our government, by our intelligence community, what they discovered that was so critical and so important, is perhaps the most important thing of all. And they discovered that humans have what they call now anomalous human capabilities. We used to call those extrasensory perceptions. We used to call those gifts of the Spirit. We used to call them all kinds of unexplained things. And what they discovered was that every human being had these latent capabilities, that if they ever manifest, the idea of a transparent government would be so in front of us. And every once in a while they do. And here's the thing. In all that research about mind control and those effects as it relates to HAARP or anything else, people always think about the Manchurian candidate or being manipulated or someone making them do stuff they don't want to do. But the defense against that and the easiest way to make all that happen and the way that you control the population is the most effective way is the simplest way. All you have to do is create an environment of fear and worry and a little underlying anxiety. And I'll tell you what happens. If you look at an EEG, a device that measures brainwave activity, what you'll see when a person is experiencing fear and worry is incoherent brain patterns, not the kind of brain patterns connected to higher intellectual ordered thinking, none of the brain patterns associated to anomalous human capabilities, none of those that carry us to our higher states of consciousness. In other words, it's the simplest thing of all. All you got to do is watch the news every night and worry about your job, worry about your kids. Fear is the adversary and is used to manipulate populations. Think of 9/11 and the Patriot Act and something done in fear where everybody in the Congress lost their mind for a few days. This is what fear does. If you can dissipate that, you have the opportunity to reach higher states of awareness. That is the key to defense against all of this. And ultimately, it's a transformation in the way we order ourselves. That science conference on mind effects, I had a physicist and PhD in mathematics who also was a nun. And she taught mathematics to doctoral students in biology at Berkeley for a number of years. She's considered one of the world's experts on radiological victims. And what her presentation in our closed conference was the next evolution of man. And that next evolution of man, from her perspective, is when we reach these higher states of awareness and government becomes transparent. We become transparent to one another, and this world will go through the gnashing of teeth in a total change. But that is possible, and many, in fact, I was shocked at the number of people in that room that echoed that same sentiment. And in fact, we had the former biophysicist, Alexander Keverainen, who was the director of the biophysics lab for the USSR Academy of Sciences. For the last 10 years, there was a USSR. And I've known Alex a long time. He spent 6 weeks in my home here in Alaska doing some work with me, and his paper that he presented was a paper explaining the underlying physics of mental telepathy, the mathematics of it, how it works, with other physicists in the room observing that and discussing it. And actually, that particular model, the reason he developed that model is when he was 15 years old, he had seen a demonstration in Russia, USSR, about the paranormal. And it just caught his attention, and he dedicated his life to figuring that out. And this guy has an IQ that's off the charts. If you look up Alexander Keverainen on a Google search, so it'll clean up the spelling for you, you will be amazed at what this man has done. But I think that is the challenge, and that is what the potential is. And quite frankly, the next years of my life are dedicated to that purpose. I mean, we're continuing to educate the public on these areas of technology, but we are in the process of developing specific technologies as well as offering the technologies of others that help us reach our higher potentials. Because to me, that is the answer. We need to dissipate fear. We need to start recognizing what we are as human beings and begin acting in a way that is constructive rather than destructive if this planet is going to change. And people are waiting, for someone to rise to the occasion. And the good news is we're already all here. It's every one of us. There is no formal organization that doesn't already exist. It's called the human race. And we need to engage the world we're in a way that is much different than the way we've engaged in the past, because it's obvious what we have done in the past has not worked. Continuing that pattern on the backdrop of high technology is the greatest risk that this planet has ever seen, and this generation will decide whether this technology serves our interest and builds the character and quality of the human experience, or absolutely enslave us and destroy that experience.
Well, we're sorry, but we got to take a quick break right now, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
If you suffer or know someone that suffers from back pain, knee pain, or any other chronic or sports-related pains, you need to visit lapingoproducts.com. Dealing with pain can affect every aspect of your life, which is why our products are designed to bring you real relief. Our products are not only easy to use, effective, and safe for the entire family, but our prices are competitive and offer a complete satisfaction guarantee. Visit lapingoproducts.com. Real life solutions for pain-free living.
Hello, this is Scott Jordan, and I would personally like to thank all of our listeners for their emails of encouragement. It means a great deal to us. All of Spectrum shows are available in two formats: an MP3 stream you can listen to on our site, as well as a YouTube version. All of Spectrum shows are full-length and free to listen to, and if I have my way, always will be. Tom and myself do all this work out of pocket, and freely give our time and effort to giving you, the listener, the best, most informative experience possible. I would also like to thank our listeners who have donated in the past to help with our expenses. Every donation goes directly to keeping the project alive. Thank you, enjoy, and keep listening.
AlternativeLifestyleProducts.com is your gateway to over 500 products ranging from herbs to pain relief products, health, and well-being. AlternativeLifestyleProducts.com is dedicated to educating and empowering you to make the best possible informed decisions about what products you can use to improve your health and well-being. Visit AlternativeLifestyleProducts.com and bring about change in your life.
Now, when he gave that talk, there were other scientists in the room in this closed meeting. How was that received? I mean, was there any... the snickering and the
oh, no,
all right, yeah,
there's
buddy.
no disagreement. We're talking about people that have published hundreds of papers in science, people that are the most well-respected, peer-reviewed, some of them in the world. There was no one laughing in the room. In fact, the mathematics work out. The trick is finding a technician that can move the mathematics, into an electronic circuit. And when that's done, believe me, the demonstration will be made. One of the simple circuits that we've got in design and actually have finished our prototypes, we'll be bringing it out later this year, is the one we demonstrated in the European Parliament when we took the HAARP issue forward. They invited us over, they flew me in to give testimony and meet the committee, and this was back in 1998, and it was the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Security, and Defense Policy, and it was the Subcommittee on Security and Disarmament. And on the February 5th, 1998 conference, we had a number of experts there, and I was able to demonstrate a infrasound device, a device that transfers sound, like people are hearing my voice, but instead of coming through a normal speaker, it was actually a transducer was put on the skin, and the sound signal actually appears in the head as that proverbial voice in the head. Now, mine required physical contact, and it has a number of applications, which I don't want to get into tonight. It's a topic for another day. But the point is, it demonstrated this infrasound technology that committee members had heard but never had seen demonstrated. And then what I explained to them is that this could also be done remotely. You didn't need any physical contact. And you could, just like people are hearing our voice today, the only difference would be they'd be standing in a crowd, they'd be the only one hearing that voice. Well, it turned out a few years later, in 2005, Woody Norris was awarded the MIT Lemelson Prize of $500,000 for developing exactly that system, which he sold then to the military. That would, as a early warning system, to put around bases, so that when people got into a certain zone, they'd hear this voice talking to them, and nobody would be there, just them, And that's a pretty startling technology. But when we demonstrated it in the European Parliament, what happened is my testimony, which I was allocated 15 minutes, they ended up giving me an hour and a half by their questions. At the end, the head of Defense News and the top technology reviewer for Santer, who was head of the European Commission at the time, approached me and said it was the most articulate discussion on weapon systems they'd ever heard, and they appreciated the fact that I was there and that they weren't going to let it go. And it was a little less than a year later that they passed their resolution regarding HAARP, and it included It was actually part of the most important security and disarmament resolution the European Parliament has ever passed. And, and that's by their own recollection. And it was their resolution A4-0005/99. That's 305/99. And it was done on January 28, 1999. There were 4 sections dealing with HAARP that passed by as large a margins as the preamble. We had gotten a coalition of Social Democrats, Conservatives, and Greens to agree on this, which was pretty much the whole of Europe. And at the end, the 27th section dealt with this mind effects issue, and this is what we were able to demonstrate and prove with 3 feet of unclassified documents, and this is what resulted in this one line on Section 27. It says, and I quote, "It calls for an international convention introducing a global ban on all developments and deployments of weapons which might enable any form of manipulation of human beings," unquote. Now, I don't know how many people have been around political bodies, but I've been involved in politics for 50 years here. My dad was in the U.S. Senate, was in the state legislature. My brother Mark was mayor of Anchorage and now is a United States senator in D.C. representing Alaska. And I know how the systems work. To get a political body to act, you have to be able to prove absolutely that your case, to get a collaboration between the parties. Then secondly, you have to have the evidence to support it, because when you start dealing with an issue like manipulating human beings, the last thing a politician wants to do is go home and answer their constituents without having a really strong body of evidence to show that there's reality there. And that's what we were able to do. And that is extremely important. And since that time, the European Parliament has continued to progress on the issue, but it is a really slow progress. In that hearing, NATO had been invited. They refused to appear. A number of people were invited who refused to appear by the chairman. But those that did appear, Rosalie Bertell, I mentioned her earlier. She was the physicist and mathematician. A number of people from organizations, including the International Red Cross. And we had broadened the agenda to not just deal with HAARP, but also to deal with non-lethal weapons, so we could get into these other applications of HAARP.
Okay. Now, I wanted to just quickly, Tom, I wanted to ask him about weather modification using HAARP. Now, when there's a hurricane, it's a cold front meeting a warm front. Now, how would HAARP interact with that, or could it?
Well, we've seen some of that lately with the formation of tornadoes, actually, which more parallels that model, which is where the cold and the warm come together and you get that shearing action, and we've all seen what that's been doing this week. What you can do, and what Eastland believed you could do, is, and he did actually a follow-on study on just this for the European Space Agency, where he actually wrote a paper, it was peer-reviewed, where you would then heat up using HAARP, the cold section, or the cold front, heat it up sufficiently to reduce the energy differential between the two. So when they hit each other, you wouldn't create that shearing effect. And so that was one of his concepts. He later then, FEMA and NASA contracted him to see if he could do it from space-based lasers using satellites, space-based systems. And he showed how you could use the same idea there. And and when we've had this many tornadoes, the excuse to spend the money, and it was Bill Clinton that went to the University of Oklahoma and said, one of these days, it was when those tornadoes whipped through Oklahoma City, and everyone was all upset, and Clinton showed up and says, one of these days, we're going to figure out how to control tornadoes, and everybody laughed. Well, that was the same place that Ben Eastland just modeled his latest research, and I'm sure Bill Clinton knew about it because it was a DARPA project.
It was 3 months previous.
Right. So here you have it. And now today, obviously, the idea of appropriating money for maybe solving that problem, I can see that happening. I mean, when you have this many people devastated, it's again, you get invited.
Well, what about the other end of the spectrum? Can you? I'm sorry, I mentioned hurricane. I meant tornado. I don't know what I was thinking. But what about increasing its strength? What about making it larger? What about
you could do
steering
that
it
deliberately? Or you could do it by mistake, just by heating the wrong area. Then all of a sudden now you've really created a situation. Now maybe a Category 1 goes to a Category 5, because of what you've done. And again,
right.
It's not an exact science, so it's more of an experiment. And here's the real big question is, do you want anybody experimenting with this stuff? I mean, isn't it erratic enough right now without us throwing some more into the mix? And that's been my opinion for some time. And Ben Eastland said this about weather modification. He said it does not belong to the military. They are not the right place to do it. He would not share additional research in that area unless it was open to the entire scientific community across all the disciplines. Other countries were involved, and it moved extremely slowly. And even then, he questioned whether it should be pursued beyond just the basic research. And because he knew that in an environment of secrecy, A, it would be misused, and B, potentially the side effects or the mistakes made by compartmentalizing the science would be not recoverable, because you're actually dealing then with the entire Earth system. And I don't believe, and Ben Eastland didn't believe, that man was mature enough or wise enough or had enough knowledge to engage that research at that level at this particular time in our history.
What about hurricanes? Can HAARP affect a hurricane hypothetically in any way?
Well, there's many believe it can, and in talking to Ben Eastland about some of that, I think there's a strong possibility. There are other systems that can as well. Back when the smoke was blowing out of Indonesia into Malaysia back a number of years ago, there was a huge controversy, big fires and nonsense going on, and it was a major news media event when they announced, hey, a Russian company just offered to create an artificial cyclone and just blow it out of the way.
I remember that.
And they're not the only ones. The Chinese offered to do that during the Olympics, and the Russians, and now other countries. In fact, the U.S. Congress last session had offered up a bill in the House and the Senate to regulate weather modification, both for the private sector and government, because right now it's an unregulated industry. And what people don't realize is you may solve somebody's rainfall problem in one place and create 20 other problems elsewhere. Now, if you were sitting in a country and somebody manipulated the weather for their benefit and drove the rain into their neighborhood and left you in drought, would you consider that an act of war if you knew they did it? I mean,
yeah, that would be bad.
It starts to get really squirrely when you think, well, I'm protecting my own interests, but at the expense of someone else. And ultimately, it's always about that. And this is, again, where the model has to change, where we have to rethink sort of how we look at the world, which means rethinking how we behave individually and how we behave collectively. And ultimately, I think that's where the solution is. People ask me all the time, how can I protect myself? How can I protect myself? That's the only way. We need to change the character and the direction in which we're going. HAARP is a symptom. Not the single problem. It is a symptom of the problem, along with many other symptoms that are invading our privacy, our personal lives, our intellectual lives, our economic lives. I mean, we are being manipulated more and more every day and becoming more and more transparent as individual people, while governments become less transparent and corporations become more powerful and more influential. We have a very upside-down situation right now that if it is not remedied, we're going to see some serious problems beyond what we're already seeing.
Yeah, I just don't think that that man. I mean, I go from good days to bad days, whether I think man's an angel or a devil, but I think it floats somewhere in between. It depends. You've got all these examples in history. You've got great examples of humans doing great things, but you've also got examples of the people fighting against the power of whatever corrupt government is running their country, and in the rebels, they win the fight, and then they go into power, and they become 10 times more corrupt.
It happens.
I mean, it's almost like I hate to say it's human nature, but it does seem to be. And then you've got the what's going on in Japan right now, multiple meltdowns happening. They're changing the level from a level 5 to it's a level 7. Well, we knew that 3 weeks ago that it was a level 7. I mean, and then they're saying they're evacuating up to 30 miles. They should be evacuating up to 200 miles, because of the particulates in the air. Why is it that trait, and how do you see that's gonna alter and change through time?
You mean in terms of the nature of people?
The nature of the selfishness or it's all about
fundamentally,
me.
I think those are attributes that humans have. I also know that that every major thing that's ever happened on this planet started with one or two people seeing it slightly differently. And I believe that that's the same kind of thing that will happen again. Only this time I think there's more people activating that are interested in seeing this kind of change, and I think it is possible. I read one of the most interesting books. In fact, out of all the things I've read in my life, and I've read thousands, literally thousands of books, it gets into this thing about fear pretty well, and it's a book called A New Earth by an author named Tolle, Tolle. Pretty important book. I consider it one of the two most important books I've ever read, and it gets to the heart of the fear and gets to the heart of what drives it. I think solutions are possible. I think people are waking up. I think the opportunity for change is here as much as the opportunity for total destruction. They always exist in the same instant. It's a question of choice that we each individually make that changes the game. And we need to start making different individual choices to change that game.
Yeah, that was a book by Eckhart Tolle.
Yep.
Wrote a
very
book
important
called,
book.
So you think that that's possible, that if more and more people awaken to these higher senses, or I mean, back in the early days, I don't know if it was early days, but it was a long time ago. The Monroe Institute worked with binaural beats, and that was working within the mind and using technology as well.
Great technology. I carry their products on the website, earthpulse.com. Monroe has great stuff. There's a lot of things out there for enhancing human performance, and many devices that are being developed, that are developed for improving human performance, reducing stress. And a lot of those technologies, we carry. We've either found them and done the due diligence on them, and then we're also creating our own circuits now that we think will bring even more dimension to this whole discussion of what's possible for enhancing human performance in the 21st century.
Okay. And
Nick, I have a kind of a question here as well. Has HAARP, with all its abilities, ever been used in places like Afghanistan, for instance, when they went looking for the Taliban and bin Laden? That
was part of the whole idea of underground tomography. Was first after the first Gulf conflict. That was the big deal. In fact, going back to the 90s again, it was at the time it was the senior senator from Alaska who my brother replaced, Ted Stevens, and he really thought this was the deal. And so no funding was granted to HAARP until they could prove that worked. And then on a show called, I believe it was called New Horizons or Horizons, it was a BBC special, and the special segment was Owning the Ionosphere, and it was where the scientists at HAARP acknowledged that they had actually made those tests and had proven with 99% accuracy they could map underground facilities. And then from there on, they continued to get their funding.
So don't you find it hard to believe that they couldn't find these guys up there with all these technologies that we have?
Well, actually, I don't, because of one other thing, is that the Taliban are not stupid, and they know the first thing they got rid of was all of their electronics, because all of your electronics create signatures. So they're riding horses, for goodness sake. They're carrying, light arms and weapon systems that don't involve high degrees of electronic signature. They dump their cell phones. They get rid of stuff that is traceable, trackable, and monitored, and that can triangulate position. They're smart people. Everything that I've read, everything I've discussed is in the open literature. If people don't believe that these guys are sophisticated enough to review that open literature, you're missing it, because that's exactly what's happening.
But I mean, if HAARP can be pinpointed and create some sort of mental manipulation, could it not be used for that purpose?
You're going to affect an entire population. You're not going to pin it down to one person. You're going to cover a hemisphere.
Yeah.
And but how anxiety.
How much can it be honed down to specific?
It's not useful that way. It's just not useful at all that way. There's other systems that do that. I'd recommend a really excellent article by the U.S. Army War College called "The Mind Has No Firewalls." Any electromagnetic carrier can be used to manipulate human behavior. radio broadcast, TV, internet, telephone, the power grid itself. You can put a signal right on top of the signal that we're broadcasting on right now and carry a signal in that will influence people, and nobody would even know it. Any of these systems can be used, and that's the point. And this is a point everyone misses. Everyone looks at mind control, they think about HAARP, only because we haven't let the issue go and we put it out there so far. But there are much more efficient ways to target individuals, groups, and in fact, even in the first Gulf War, after the first Gulf War was over, it was Scottish media that reported that we had used Project Solo, where we had piggybacked a signal on their radio broadcast. They're broadcasting the Muslim music and prayers into the country, and we just piggybacked a signal on top of theirs that created an underlying sense of dis-ease, of anxiety, of stress. And what did we see in the first Gulf War? The fourth largest army in the world give up like they had just been on a first-grade fire drill. You know, it was ridiculous. They were,
walking out of the desert with their hands held high, and yeah,
and this is exactly before the Scottish media reported on. I was asked by CBC-TV in Canada about this, and I said, well, I'm speculating now, but the time will come, and this was filmed and broadcast. I said the time will come when we'll see that this is in fact the case, and that's what Scottish media reported. And they did the due diligence, and sure enough, that's the answer. But it affected the entire population that we were headed into, and it was effective. But once we were integrated into that population, we're subjected to all kinds of things as well. But it was just this underlying signal that created that tension, and we saw how powerful that can be.
Well, if we had so much success in that particular part of the country, why can we not have success in Afghanistan? We're still losing people up there.
Yeah, I want to just comment on this quickly. I think, it's my opinion, that they didn't need to look for Osama because Osama was killed deader than a doornail on December 13, 2001 in Tora Bora. He wasn't alive. He's deader than a doornail. Why look for a guy that's dead?
The thing is, I can't speculate on why the government or what their motivations are in using systems or not using them. All I can do is report on what we found and what we know. And what you're asking me to do is speculate on what I don't know and what no evidence that I've seen would allow me to go there. And this is what I won't do. I won't speculate. And if I do, I'll make it really clear that it's my opinion, because we report on the basis of the facts that we find, and we report those facts. And as a result of that, for 16 years, I've stayed credible in this work. I've done over 3,000 radio broadcasts, over 200 lectures, and dozens of documentaries with major film groups around the world on this issue as well as many other technology issues. And it's because we stick to the facts. The facts are enough. What we've seen with too many researchers in the alternative fields is when the facts no longer seem to generate sales for them, they start exaggerating those facts. And then before you know it, they're not facts anymore, they're fiction. Right. And what I have done is find a way to make my living while I'm pursuing the areas of interest to me, so I don't fall into that trap. And and that is really important because I think we have a responsibility as reporters to be accurate, to shape the news in a way that people get the information so they can make decisions. I believe that's what the freedom of the press is about informing the public, not just saying whatever we want with no responsibility attached to it. I think we have total responsibility. What I say, if it affects you, if it makes you do something, I am responsible for that. And so when I get on the radio and I talk about these technologies, I take full responsibility for what I say, and I take it very, very seriously because I know people will act on what I say, and I encourage you, don't act on what I say till you verify it yourself. And that's
always the best way
of real knowledge.
Now, didn't you? You did speculate once and said that the U.S. would break their treaty, their missile treaty, within a year, and that was speculation. But it was also, you got a lot of research to back that up.
Right.
You put a lot of time and effort into looking into things and saying, okay, here's where I think things are going to go. I think the U.S. are going to break that treaty within a year, and they ended up doing it in 3 months.
Right. It was with the European Parliament, and the committee challenged me on it because their intelligence community didn't deduce that. We did, and we said not only that it would be abandoned, but that the excuse to doing it would be there is no Soviet Union, therefore there is no treaty, which are almost the exact words of Senator Ted Stevens, who my brother replaced, when he rose on the floor of the Senate and made that statement, and we abandoned that ABM treaty, and it was that forecast of the future based on all the evidence that we had gathered that told us that convinced the European Parliament that we were a better source of information than the government interfaces they had in NATO and in the American mission, because we were at least telling them the truth.
There you go. You see, you do enough research, you can figure these things out. And then you can say things and they eventually come to pass. Even in that instance, I was very clear, very, very clear that it was my opinion, but that time would prove it out. And it did. And that's the thing about all of this is this story is not about me. It's about us and what's happening to us on this planet right now. And, NATO, after that hearing, they went in there like gangbusters, and the American mission sent people into every office to try and attack me as a person, which politicians know that game better than anybody, If you don't want to deal with the facts, shoot the messenger. Well, I'm a reporter, okay? I don't consider myself a scientist. I am a reporter. Most of the reporters you see on the 6 o'clock news have no advanced degrees in anything. They're parrots for a press release. I do real research, I verify it with real scientists, and I put it in a book with real footnotes that you can go look up and draw your own conclusions. And in 16 years, any predictions we've made have been proven correct. And that is extremely important. Okay. Just on an educated opinion, where do you think that the technology is today, as far as mind control and weather manipulation?
We're there. I mean, we have the capability. The big stuff that's going on now, there's a project with DARPA and the University of California for modeling the human brain for electronic telepathy and then being able to impose thoughts on others. And that is actually moving forward. And I think that is a huge concern, and one that will continue to create problems. I think the mind control issue is the most important issue that I've ever covered. It's one that I'm going to continue to cover, now and in the future. Perhaps at another time we can do a program just on that issue, and I think it'll be pretty effective. And I know we're right up against the clock at the moment. We agreed to be on with you guys for an hour tonight.
Yep.
But let's try it again, and I really hope people check out our website at earthpulse.com. Support our work by getting our books and publications, and then when you're done with them, donate them to a library so others can read them, or send them to your favorite politician that you might actually think might act on them. And that's how things get done, and it also keeps us in our work.
The other books that you have, Earth Rising, I believe you have 2 of them, Earth Rising 1 and 2. Are they available on your website, earthpulse.com?
Absolutely, and also all of, Amazon, all of them have them, but that's the best, and definitely check it out.
Okay, are you going to be doing any... Go ahead.
I have one little question here. I saw on your website that you have some cordyceps information, and I have a bit of a background in mycology, so I was kind of curious about it.
Well, it's a hybridized cordyceps. It has 400% more polysaccharides than the natural. They're grown in labs in California in controlled environments, so they're not imported Chinese garbage. They're U.S. made to the highest standards in verified organic environment to California standards. So very, very high quality, and we consider it probably the best price for what we market. We have very good effect. We have a full spectrum, which has 6 different mushrooms, and also has cholesterol, which is or transfer factor from the organic cow's milk from the first 6 weeks of after birth. That combination is then reduced to by 95% particle reduction to get underneath the micron for absorbability. So those are things that we've developed in conjunction with our partners here in the U.S. and in Germany. But our health supplements are pretty unique. We have 4 different ones. They're either based on nanoparticle size or electron flows, and so both the things you've asked me about are relevant to improving overall health and capacity. Cordyceps are just incredible for a number of purposes, mainly increasing oxygen and stamina, among many other things.
Now that's another whole area we could get into is
I do a lot of radio on, and in fact some guys bring me on regularly because there's a lot that we are involved in. And again, we'll do this again sometime in the near term. Check us out at earthpulse.com. And again, thanks you guys for having me on tonight.
And I was happy to have you on, and we're going to close it right down right now. And thank you, Dr. Nick Begich, for being on the show. Everybody, why don't you go check out Nick's website at www.earthpulse.com. And you can check out, he's got all kinds. He's got HemiSync on there. He's got nutritional products, plus his books on HAARP, Angels Don't Play This HAARP, and his latest 2 books. Now, do you have another book coming out, or do you have do you have any speaking tours you're going to be on that you want anybody to know about?
I haven't. I quit lecturing 2 years ago, and I've considered starting again in the fall. And so when those opportunities come, I'll start looking at them a little more closely. And then we post that on our website. We also have a flash list that we only send out maybe every few months. But if we're doing something like a lecture, we try and get that information out to folks.
Well, now everybody knows you're willing to do lectures again, so you'll probably get a bunch of calls.
Well, you never know how that goes. But I appreciate it again, guys, and let's do it again sometime in the future.
Okay. Good night, everybody, and we'll catch you guys next week.